My brother said it right there in front of the notary, in front of our parents, in front of everyone. Dad's shop is mine now. You were never part of this. He didn't even look at me when he said it, just slid the paperwork across the table like it was already done. I sat there and didn't say a word, because I had been waiting for that moment for 8 months. Let me back up. My father ran an auto repair shop in Dayton, Ohio for 31 years. Not a chain, not a franchise, just a 2-bay garage on Wilmington Avenue with his name above the door. Callaway Auto Est, 1992. He built it for nothing after he got laid off from GM. He used to say the shop was his 3rd child. My brother Rowan and I were the first 2. When I was 12, I started spending Saturdays there. I'd sweep the floors, answer the phone, hand my dad tools he'd forget the name of mid-sentence. I wasn't doing it for money. I genuinely liked being there. I liked the smell of motor oil and the sound of the impact wrench. The way my dad would explain what was wrong with a car like he was telling you a story. He made everything make sense. Rowan never came. He was in travel baseball from the time he was 9, and after that it was always something. Football in high school, his friends, his car. My dad didn't push him. He said boys needed room. I never really understood what that meant, since I was there every weekend and nobody ever said I needed room. By the time I was in college, studying accounting at Wright State, I was doing the shop's books remotely during tax season, not because my dad asked. Because I looked at what he was paying someone to do it and I knew I could do it better. He paid me what he would have paid the accountant. I told him to keep it. He put it in an envelope anyway and hid it in the glove compartment of my car. That was my dad. He got sick in the spring of my 28th year. Pancreatic cancer. Stage 3, which the doctors said with the careful tone of people who want you to understand something without making you say it out loud. We caught it later than we should have because he kept telling my mom his back hurt from bending under cars. He was 64. I moved back home to Dayton 3 weeks after the diagnosis. I took remote work. I managed his shop scheduling from his kitchen table while he did chemo, and when he was too tired to come in, I'd drive to Wilmington Avenue and open up myself. I learned how to run the front-end operation, not the mechanical work. I'm not a mechanic, but the customer intake, the estimates, the vendor relationships, the payroll. Marcus, who'd been my dad's lead tech for 11 years, walked me through the parts I didn't know. Between the two of us, we kept the shop running almost exactly as it had been. Rowan came home once during that period. For 4 days in August, right after he'd finished a golf trip to Scottsdale. He sat with my dad. They watched baseball. He took my mom out to dinner. He was warm and present and exactly who you'd want around when someone you love is sick. He left on a Sunday morning, hugged my dad at the door, and drove back to Columbus. I stayed. My dad passed in October, 2 days before Halloween. It was a Tuesday. The leaves were peak color, which I know sounds like something a bad writer puts in a story to make you feel things, but that's just when it was. I held his hand. My mom was on the other side of him. Rowan got there 4 hours later. He had been at a work event in Cincinnati and said he'd come as soon as he got my mom's message. By then, there was nothing left to do but sit in the room and not know what to say. My dad had a will. He'd updated it 2 years before he got sick, with a lawyer named Gerald Fitch who had an office above a dry cleaner on Brown Street. The will was clear. The house to my mother, his personal savings split equally between Rowan and me, and the shop. Callaway Auto left to me. He wrote a separate letter to explain it. I only read it once. He said he was leaving the shop to me because I was the one who understood what it was. Not just as a business, but as a thing he had made. He said he knew Rowan would understand. He said he hoped Rowan would understand. He said he hoped Rowan would understand. Rowan did not understand. The first conversation happened 2 weeks after the funeral. We were at my mom's house, cleaning out my dad's office. Rowan picked up a framed photo of the shop, the original sign, before my dad repainted it in 2004 and held it for a moment. So what's the plan with Callaway? He said. I told him I was planning to keep it running, that Marcus and the team were solid, that we'd had a profitable year despite everything, that I wanted to carry it forward. He set the photo down. You know it would make more sense to sell it. I said I disagreed. There's a buyer, actually. He said it like he'd been waiting to say it. A regional chain. They've been expanding into secondary markets. I talked to their acquisition guy at a conference last spring. They pay fair market. I looked at him. You talked to a buyer before Dad died? He made a face. I was thinking ahead. That's not a crime. I'm not selling the shop, Rowan. He didn't argue. He just nodded in the way someone does when they've decided to try again later. He tried again in November and December. Every time it was a slightly different version of the same argument. The market was right. The buyer was serious. I didn't really have time to run a shop while working remotely. It would be a fair split between the two of us. That last part was always in there. A fair split. Like the shop was his to split. My mom stayed out of it at first. She told me she didn't want to get in the middle. But by January she started saying things like, your brother just wants what's best for everyone, and your father would have wanted you two to work together on this. I didn't tell her that wasn't what my father's letter said. Because I didn't want to make her choose between believing my father's words and believing Rowan. I should have said something. I know that now. In February, Rowan called me and said he'd found the original partnership paperwork from when my dad first opened the shop. Dad had taken on a small investor in 1992. A cousin named Terry who'd put in $8,000 and gotten a 15% stake on paper. Terry had never been involved in the business. He'd moved to Phoenix in 1995. My dad had bought him out informally, just wrote him a check, but there was no formal dissolution paperwork on record with the state. Rowan said this made the ownership structure ambiguous. I asked him how he knew about this. He paused. I've been doing my own research. I called Gerald Fitch that afternoon. Gerald said what Rowan found was real. The 1992 partnership agreement existed, but that without Terry contesting anything and given the clear succession in my father's will, it was unlikely to affect anything legally. However, he recommended I get ahead of it and make sure the will was filed for probate and the business succession was properly documented with the state. That process takes time. In Ohio, probate can stretch 4 to 6 months if there are any complications. Rowan knew this. 3 weeks later, he filed a formal contest. His argument, drafted by an attorney he'd hired in Columbus, was that the will had been written when my father was already cognitively affected by early illness. That the cancer, while undiagnosed at the time, had been present and potentially influencing his judgment. He submitted a letter from one of my father's casual acquaintances, claiming my dad had seemed confused at a cookout in 2021, a year before the will was updated. I want to tell you I wasn't surprised. I want to tell you I saw it coming clearly, but I didn't. Not that version of it. I knew Rowan wanted the money. I did not know he'd question our father's mind. My mom called me crying that night. Not because she agreed with Rowan. Because she didn't know what to do. Gerald referred me to a probate litigation attorney named Anita Walsh. She had an office in Centerville, diplomas from Ohio State, and the kind of calm that comes from spending 20 years watching families do exactly this to each other. She sat across from me at her desk and said, "Walk me through everything." I did. I brought a binder. I kept records. Not because I was preparing for a legal fight, but because that's how I work. Tax years, shop financials, payroll records showing my role in operations since my dad's diagnosis, emails, the accounting work I'd done going back to my college years, my dad's medical records from Gerald, which showed his diagnosis date and the timeline of his will update. Anita looked at the records and then looked at me. Your father updated the will 18 months before his diagnosis was confirmed. The cancer was not present at the time in any documented way. Your brother is going to have a hard time arguing incapacity. Will it go to court? I asked. Probably a mediation session first, she said. If your brother's attorney is smart, he'll see the evidence and advise settling. If he's not smart, or if your brother won't listen, then yes. I asked her what settling meant. Probably your brother asking for a buyout, a share of the shop's appraised value in cash. I said I didn't have that kind of cash. She said, "Let's not get ahead of ourselves." Mediation was scheduled for a Thursday in April at a neutral office in downtown Dayton. Conference room on the 6th floor. Beige carpet, fake plants, a view of the parking garage. I got there early. My attorney was already at the table. Across from us would be Rowan and his attorney, a man named Derek Palms, who had the energy of someone who charges $400 an hour and wants you to know it. My mom had asked if she could come. I told her gently that it wasn't that kind of meeting. She stayed home. I found out later that Rowan had called her that morning and told her the mediation was basically a formality and that things would be resolved that day in a way that was fair to everyone. I don't know what she said back. Rowan came in 5 minutes late. He was wearing a blazer over a Buckeye shirt, which I only mention because I know he owns 3 suits and made a choice not to wear one. He sat down across from me and nodded like we were at Thanksgiving. His attorney spoke first. Long preamble about the complexity of family businesses, the importance of honoring a father's legacy, the challenges of probate. He was building up to something. I could tell. Then he slid a document across the table. It was an agreement Rowan wanted me to sign. It proposed a co-management structure for Callaway Auto. Rowan and I would each hold 50%, with major decisions requiring joint approval. A liquidation clause allowed either party to trigger a sale if they couldn't reach agreement within 12 months. In other words, give him half the shop, and if we disagreed on anything, the shop would be sold within a year. It was elegant. I'll give him that. Anita leaned over and said quietly, "Don't react." I didn't. Then Derek Palm said, "We'd also like to raise the question of the shop's current operational legitimacy." He opened a folder. Given the unresolved 1992 partnership structure, there's an argument that the business has been operating without proper legal authority since the informal buyout of the minority stakeholder. Any contracts signed in that period could be considered voidable. He was saying that 8 months of operations, under my management, while my dad was dying and after he died, could be retroactively challenged. Vendor contracts, lease renewals, customer agreements. Anita didn't flinch. "That's an interesting theory," she said. "Let's discuss the evidence." She opened her own folder and placed 3 documents on the table. The first was a letter from Terry, the cousin from Phoenix, dated 3 weeks prior. Anita had tracked him down through public records. Terry confirmed he had received a check from my father in 1997, had signed a handwritten release, and had no claim to or interest in Callaway Auto. He'd written the letter without being asked for anything in return. He said he'd always felt bad that my dad never got around to the formal paperwork and he was glad to clear it up. Rowan looked at that letter for a long time. The second document was a sworn statement from Gerald Fitch detailing the process of drafting my father's will, the dates, the conversations, my father's stated reasoning. Gerald had taken notes during their meetings as he always did. One note, dated March 14, 2022, read, "Client is clear-minded and deliberate. Wishes to ensure business succession to daughter. Aware of potential family tension. Wants reasons documented." Clear-minded and deliberate. The third document was a forensic document analysis from a firm Anita had hired. Rowan had submitted his own letter from my father, handwritten, undated, in which my father supposedly expressed doubts about leaving the shop to me. The handwriting analyst had compared the letter to 12 verified samples of my father's handwriting from the same period. The ink composition was inconsistent with my dad's usual pens. The pressure patterns didn't match his documented signature style from that year. The letter was not written by my father. I had not known about the third document until that moment. Anita had told me she was looking into the letter, but hadn't told me what she found because she didn't want me carrying it. She is a very good attorney. The room was quiet. Derek Palms asked for a recess. They were in the hallway for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on the conference room wall and didn't look away. Anita asked me if I wanted water. I said no. She got up and poured me some anyway and set it in front of me. When Rowan came back in, he sat down slowly. He didn't look at Derek Palms. He looked at me. "I didn't write that letter," he said. I said nothing. "I found it in Dad's stuff. I thought it was real." Anita said, "That's something you and your attorney should discuss carefully." Derek Palm said they would be withdrawing the will contest. I had been holding my hands flat on my thighs under the table since I sat down. I didn't move them. I looked at the fake plant in the corner. I looked at the beige carpet. I thought about my dad sitting in his shop on a slow Tuesday afternoon. Radio on, doing paperwork, not knowing any of this was coming. The probate process concluded in late May. Callaway Auto was formally transferred into my name. I stood in Gerald Fitch's office while he walked me through the paperwork, and when I signed the last page, he said, "Your father would be proud." He said it simply, not like a platitude. I believed him. I called my mom that evening. She already knew, Rowan had told her, but she cried anyway when she heard my voice. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know it had gotten that bad. I told her I knew. I didn't say anything else. Rowan texted me 3 days later. No preamble. I should have handled things differently. I'm sorry. I read it twice. I put my phone face down on the counter and went back to the spreadsheet I'd been working on. I didn't respond for 2 weeks. Not out of cruelty. I just needed to think about what was true to say, and it took that long to figure it out. Eventually I wrote back, "I know. We'll get there. Give me time." I don't know if we will get there. That's the honest answer. He's still my brother. My mom loves him. I have a memory of him teaching me to ride a bike in our driveway when I was 6, holding the back of the seat, running alongside me, letting go without telling me. I didn't fall. But I also have 8 months of driving to Wilmington Avenue before sunrise. I have the memory of my dad's hand in mine on a Tuesday in October. I have the shop now, the ledger balanced, the bays full, Marcus still there, the sign above the door still reading Callaway Auto, still my father's name. I walked through the whole building by myself the evening after I signed the paperwork. I turned every light on. I looked at the lift my dad had saved for 3 years to buy. I looked at the whiteboard where Marcus writes the job list each morning in the same red marker, has done it the same way for 11 years. I looked at the small framed photo above the cash register. My dad and me at the shop. I may be 14. I'm holding a wrench like I know what to do with it. He's laughing. I stood there for a while. Then I turned off the lights, locked the door, and went home. I thought a lot about what made Rowan do what he did. Not to excuse it, I'm not there yet, maybe never fully, but because I genuinely wanted to understand it. He's not a monster. He's someone who grew up being told he was exceptional, and after a while, that becomes the only story you know how to tell about yourself. When my dad left the shop to me, it didn't just feel to Rowan like a business decision. It felt like the story changing, and people who've never had to question their own narrative don't handle that quietly. That's not a defense. That's just what I figured out sitting with it over months. What I know about myself is different. I wasn't strategic about any of this. I didn't stay in Dayton because I was protecting my inheritance. I stayed because my dad was sick and the shop needed someone and I was the one who knew how to do it. I kept records because I'm an accountant and that's how I think. I hired Anita because Gerald told me I needed to. None of it was a plan. It just turned out that living the right way left a paper trail. That's the part I keep coming back to. Rowan came into that mediation room with a fabricated letter and a legal theory built on a 50-year-old cousin's handshake deal. I came in with 8 months of payroll records and a forensic document analyst and a statement from Terry and Phoenix who just wanted to do the decent thing. The difference wasn't that I was smarter or better prepared. The difference was that I had been actually doing the work, and the work was real, and real things leave evidence. There's something in that I think is worth sitting with. Not as a lesson I'm handing you. I don't think I'm in a position to hand anyone lessons right now, but just as something I noticed. You can construct an argument out of almost anything. You can take a handwritten note, an old agreement, a neighbor's vague memory, and build something that sounds like a case. But constructed things have seams. They don't hold up the same way that true things do, especially when someone patient and thorough starts looking closely. Anita was patient and thorough. So was Gerald. So, in his quiet way, was Marcus, who kept showing up to the shop every morning and writing the job list in red marker like nothing had changed, because for him, the work was always the point. I think about my dad a lot. I think about the fact that he wrote a note to Gerald in March of 2022 saying he wanted his reasons documented. He knew there might be tension. He wasn't naive about his own family. He just trusted that the truth, once written down, would be findable. He was right. What I want to carry from all of this isn't anger, though some of that is still in there. What I want to carry is that standard. Do the work. Keep the record. Tell the truth in writing when you can. Not because you're anticipating a fight, just because that's how you live with integrity. And integrity, it turns out, is the one thing nobody can forge. The shop is mine. My name is on the deed now, not just in my father's will, but in every state and county record that matters. I open it on Monday mornings. I check the job list. I make sure Marcus has what he needs. I answer the phone the same way my dad did, with the shop's name in a real voice. That's what I have. That's enough.